Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we are taking a journey far older than the pyramids, adrift across a vast and silent plain known as Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. We will trace the first whispers of civilization, the deep roots of our shared human story. Let me know where in the world you are listening from. Wherever you are, I invite you to settle into your space, find warmth, and get comfortable. Let the quiet of your room gather around you like a soft blanket. There is nothing left to resist, no plans, no worries, no tasks. Everything can wait until the morning light. Invite your body to soften and let your mind follow. Let my voice become a soft anchor, guiding you gently towards sleep. We are drifting back through time to a land shaped by ancient rivers and blanketed by the still night air. Nothing in tonight's story will disturb your sense of peace. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Take a long, slow, soothing breath, feeling the night air fill you and release it completely, letting go of any residual thoughts from the day. Just one more, deeply and gently out. The night outside is deep, quiet, and vast. The moon perhaps casts a pale silver light over the world, or perhaps the clouds are thick, holding the deep darkness close. In the stillness, we leave the quick pace of the modern world behind. Tonight, our journey takes us not through battlefields or grand palaces, but through the slow, warm, mythic pacing of history itself. We are traveling to the cradle of civilization, a place where the human story first learned to write itself. We travel to the place the Greeks would later call Mesopotamia, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates. Allow yourself to sink deeper into the comfort of your bed, into the steady rhythm of this voice. Our epic tonight is one of mud water and slow growth, a quiet telling of how the first cities arose from the dust of the plain. Let the story begin to weave itself around you, as soft and ancient as the silt left behind by the river. If these gentle night journeys help you drift into rest, you may leave a quiet like or subscribe. Only if it makes your evening feel softer. Chapter 1. Origins. The whisper of water and the first dust settle now. As we trace the very first outlines of this ancient land, focusing on where everything begins, the geological and spiritual ancient background of Mesopotamia. Before the first king ruled, before the first clay tablet was etched, there were only the two great rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. They were the twin forces that gave the land its name and its very life. Flowing down from the mountains of Anatolia, they carried down silt and fresh water, carving their way across the featureless plain. Mesopotamia, as a place, was an act of creation by water. The land itself was built from the sediment these rivers deposited over countless millennia. Think of it not as solid ground, but as a vast, low-lying, and often unpredictable wetland, slowly being raised by the bounty of the north. This landscape was one of profound contrasts. To the west lay the vast, dry, silent Syrian desert, a realm of sand and nomadism. To the east and north were the jagged, unpredictable Zagros Mountains, the source of the rivers, and a boundary that constantly pressed in on the plain. But in the center between the waters lay the fertile crescent, where the soil was deep, dark, and rich. The people who first drifted into this region were drawn not by gold or stone, but by the promise of the flood. Unlike the Nile, whose flood was gentle and predictable, the Tigris and Euphrates were volatile. The floods came in the spring, often violently, sometimes too early, sometimes too late. This inherent unpredictability of the water became the first great lesson, the very foundation of the Mesopotamian worldview. They learned early that life was a delicate balance, sustained by forces that were immense, often capricious, and always required careful negotiation. This struggle for control over the water The building of the first dikes and irrigation canals is where the first seeds of organized society were truly planted. In their deepest religious beliefs, this uncertainty was reflected. The universe was born from the chaos of two primordial bodies of water: Apsu, the sweet water of the subterranean ocean, and Tiamat, the salt water of the sea. Their mingling, the mixing of the sweet and the volatile, was the source of all things. This first chapter is the deep, slow breath of the earth, the constant rhythmic sound of the river against the mud banks. It is the time when the first wandering groups of humans seeking refuge and sustenance began to slow their pace, captivated by the reliable, if dangerous, cycle of the rivers. They are settling near the river mouths, looking out over the misty marshlands, and imagining how to bend the water to their will. There is no conflict here, yet only potential. The world is a canvas of mud and sky, waiting for the first city walls to rise. The air is still, the silence broken only by the lapping of the water. Let this ancient, fertile peace fill your mind as you drift. Chapter 2. Formation. The dawn mist over the first cities. We move now into the gentle, incremental shaping of Mesopotamian society, where the ideas of organization, religion, and urban life began to crystallize in the south, leading to the great Sumerian culture. This is the age of morning mist over the marshes, where human communities slowly established deep roots. The earliest inhabitants during what is known as the Ubaid period, say 6500, 4100 BCE, were learning to master the twin rivers. This was not a quick, dramatic conquest, but a patient, continuous effort. They quickly realized that in this flat, open land, individual survival was impossible. The water's bounty required a collective breath, a massive shared commitment to irrigation. Picture a field under the soft light of dawn. Small groups of people, their hands moving with patient rhythm, are not just scattering seeds, but are carefully digging and maintaining the irrigation canals, thin, watery veins, extending from the great rivers deep into the dry land. These canals were the very first infrastructure of civilization, and they were quiet promises made between neighbors. If we work together, the water will flow for all of us. This necessity for cooperation led naturally to the first form of centralized authority, though it was not yet a king with a sword. It was the temple. The earliest grand buildings in these settlements were not palaces, but structures dedicated to the patron deities of the waters and the sky, figures like Enlil, the god of wind and storm, and Inanna, or Ishtar, whose power was as unpredictable as the flood. The priests who oversaw these temples became the first managers, the first organizers of large-scale labor. They possessed the knowledge of the stars, the seasons, and the subtle signs that predicted the river's behavior. People willingly entrusted the surplus grain and the organization of the communal digging to the temple, the house of the god, because it represented stability and collective memory. This was governance born from gentle shared necessity. These simple settlements, fueled by the organized fields, began to swell slowly, silently, entering what is called the Uruk period, c. 4100, 3100 BCE. They grew denser, higher, built layer upon layer from the readily available material mud brick. The zenith of this formative period is the city of Uruk. Uruk was not built in a day or a year, but expanded slowly, organically, like a breathing creature. By around 3200 BCE, Uruk was the world's first true city, a sprawling society where abstract rules and organization became necessary to manage the vast number of inhabitants. And it is here in the quiet, crowded halls of Uruk that the greatest revolution of this layer takes place, the birth of writing. It began not with poetry or myth, but with the mundane necessity of accounting. How much barley did the temple receive? How many sheep were grazed? And the priests needed a way to track the complex logistics of a city-state. They started pressing reeds into soft clay tablets, drawing simple pictures, which evolved into cuneiform signs. The first whispers of history were simply the quiet sound of a reed stylus making a mark in the soft, moist clay. This transition from oral memory to written record fundamentally shaped the future. It allowed knowledge to accumulate beyond the lifespan of any single person. The very idea of Sumer, the culture of the South, defined by its language and innovations, was now solidified, marked in the clay. Its formation was a slow, deep process, like the hardening of the clay itself, leading toward the first great epics of the world. Chapter 3. Early Journeys. The Age of Kings and the Search for Immortality. Allow the image of Uruk, the first great city, to settle gently in your mind. We move now into the phase of early journeys, the period where the Sumerian city-states began their first tentative movements outward, defining the concepts of kingship and heroism. This journey is marked by the quiet transition from priest-manager to warrior-king, a development that unfolded not with thunder, but with the slow, steady pressure of human organization. In the early dynastic period, ca. 2900 to 2350 BCE, the cities of Sumer, Lagash, Kish, and Uruk were fiercely independent walled islands of order amidst the open plain. Their growth demanded defense and expansion, primarily over water rights and prime agricultural land. Slowly, the role of the priest ruler gave way to the Lugal, great man or king, who was primarily a military leader. This change wasn't necessarily violent, but gradual, a functional response to the environment. The Lugal was the one who could keep the city safe during raids, ensuring the continued peaceful tone of the collective and the vital flow of water. This period is characterized by the quiet persistence of these localized kingdoms, each building its own massive ziggurat step towers dedicated to their patron god, as a symbolic mountain connecting their city to the heavens. The most famous figure to emerge from this early journey is Gilgamesh, who is said to have ruled Uruk around 2700 BCE. His story, preserved on those ancient clay tablets, is the world's first true epic, a profound and moving exploration of human limitation. Gilgamesh was described as 2/3 god and 1/3 man, gifted with immense strength, but also immense restlessness. His journey, however, quickly became a search for meaning. Accompanied by his wild counterpart Enkidu, Gilgamesh traveled the known world, undertaking great feats, slaying the monstrous Humbaba in the cedar forest. These were not battles for empire, but early journeys of self-discovery, setting the pattern for all heroes who would follow. The gentle core of the Gilgamesh story, the part that resonates softly across the millennia, is not the fighting, but the grief. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh confronts for the first time the absolute finality of mortal fate. His frantic, weary journey across the desert in search of the plant of eternal youth is the human heart breaking against the ancient reality that all life must end. Imagine Gilgamesh, exhausted, sitting on the dusty bank of a river, staring at the swift-moving water. His search for the secret of immortality fails not because he is defeated in battle, but because a serpent steals the plant of life while he sleeps. It is a quiet, natural betrayal, reinforcing the Sumerian belief that immortality belongs only to the gods, and that the greatest achievement for a human is to accept this truth and embrace their legacy. Gilgamesh's acceptance of his fate brought him home. He realized that the immortality he sought was not in endless life, but in the enduring stone walls of Uruk that he had built, and in the written words that recorded his deeds. The journey brought the hero back to the collective, to the city he had founded. This period of early city-states was defined by these small contained worlds. They were fiercely independent, communicating through the same cuneiform script, worshipping the same pantheon, but often engaged in minor skirmishes over territory. The landscape was one of walled gardens, each city an island of order, surrounded by the disorder of the open plain and the desert. The early journey of Mesopotamia was not about creating a unified nation, but about establishing the first stable, complex micro-societies rooted deeply in the clay and defined by the quiet strength of their foundational myths. They were learning to live, and more importantly, learning to record. Chapter 4: Turning Points. The Winds of Akkad and the First Empire. We transition now softly into the major turning points, a time of significant transformation. Yet we will view these changes not as abrupt shocks, but as changing seasons sweeping across the wide Mesopotamian plain. The shift from the independent Sumerian city-states to the unified idea of an empire was a monumental yet strangely fluid event. For centuries, the Sumerian cities had existed in a delicate stasis, occasionally fighting, but fundamentally respecting their shared culture. The great change came from the north, where a different linguistic group, the Akkadians, or Semitic speakers, had been quietly absorbing the Sumerian culture while maintaining their own distinct identity. The gentle wind of change arrived with a figure named Sargon of Akkad. Sargon's origin story is rooted in the quiet mythic traditions of the river. He was said to be a foundling abandoned by his mother in a basket woven from reeds and set adrift upon the Euphrates. Rescued by a gardener, Sargon rose from humble beginnings, eventually becoming the cupbearer to the king of Kish. Sargon's ascent was swift, marking a gentle yet firm shift in power. He was the first to realize that the endless squabbling between the independent cities fighting Lagash Uruk, battling Kish, was a weakness. He saw the potential for unity. Around 2334 BCE, Sargon established a new capital, Akkad, in the location of which is still lost to the sands, adding to its misty, legendary quality. Akkad was not an ancient, sacred city like Uruk, but a powerful administrative center. Sargon did not seek to destroy the Sumerian identity. Instead, he embraced it while imposing a new political structure. Imagine the change unfolding across the landscape. Instead of small, isolated city-states focused only on their local patron god, Sargon imposed a vision of territorial rule. His armies moved quietly across the plains, conquering cities one by one. But the conquest was more political than destructive. Sargon placed loyal Akkadian governors in power, but he maintained the Sumerian cuneiform script, and he promoted the intermingling of the two pantheons. This was the birth of the Akkadian Empire, the world's first large multinational territorial state. It stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. A vast network of cities and trade routes held together not just by military might, but by a shared administrative language and the constant movement of messengers and goods. The effect on the culture was profound and subtle. Kingship was no longer seen merely as the local protector of a city, but as a divine mandate to rule a vast domain. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, even took the radical yet serene step of declaring himself divine, calling himself the god of Akkad, a claim that elevated the king above mortal men and ensured loyalty not just to a person, but to a god-king. The Akkadian Empire was a season of unprecedented growth and stability. The arts flourished. Monumental sculptures celebrating the divine king became common. Writing evolved from mere accounting to complex literature and monumental inscriptions. However, all seasons must eventually turn. The Akkadian Empire, for all its glory, only lasted about 150 years. Its collapse was not marked by a single dramatic battle, but by a slow, subtle weakening perhaps, due to a combination of internal mismanagement, drought, and pressure from the hill peoples, the Guti. The empire did not vanish overnight. It simply dissolved the great collective structure, breaking down into its constituent parts. The memory of Akkad remained, however, the quiet, enduring proof that a vast political unity was possible. The wind of unity was gone, but the seed of empire had been planted in the deep, fertile earth of Mesopotamia, ready for the next spring to come. Chapter 5. Legacy, the Echoes of Law. Cuneiform and a timeless return. The gentle winds of the Akkadian Empire have faded, and we now arrive at the phase of legacy. This is the deep, slow, serene part of our journey, where we observe what endured long after the political structures crumbled. This is the echo that Mesopotamia left behind, an influence that shaped every civilization that followed. With the collapse of Akkad, there was a quiet, profound yearning for the stability and cultural purity of the past. This led to a brief, beautiful revival, known as the Neo-Sumerian period, centered around the city of Ur-C, 2112-2004 BCE. Under rulers like Ur-Nammu, the Sumerian language and literature experienced a serene return. Ur-Nammu is perhaps best remembered not for his conquests, but for leaving behind one of the earliest known law codes. This code, predating the famous one of Hammurabi, was an attempt to impose structure and fairness after the preceding chaos. It quietly addressed issues of compensation for injuries, ownership, and justice. The existence of these laws, written in the soft clay, demonstrates the deep, enduring Mesopotamian commitment to cosmic order and predictability. This quiet, persistent love for order found its full expression centuries later in the rise of Babylon and the enduring figure of Hammurabi. Hammurabi, ruling Babylon around the 18th century BCE, did what Sargon did, but with greater administrative depth. He created a lasting empire, not just with military might, but with the power of the written word. His famous Code of Hammurabi was not just a list of laws. It was a public declaration of the king's commitment to justice, inscribed on massive diorite stele stone pillars, and placed where all could see them. This simple act ensured that the law was fixed, visible, and applicable to all, a true legacy of the Sumerian invention of writing. Yet the most profound legacy lies in the cuneiform script itself. The simple marks pressed into clay for accounting evolved into a versatile tool capable of recording complex epics, sophisticated mathematics, astronomical observations, and diplomatic correspondence. This clay tablet tradition endured for nearly 3 millennia, linking disparate empires, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, in a shared continuous literary conversation. This writing allowed for the silent, slow accumulation of knowledge that defined the Mesopotamian mind. Their astronomers, gazing at the still night sky, meticulously tracked the movements of the planets, dividing time into 60-second minutes and 60-minute hours, a legacy that rests on your clock face tonight. Their mathematicians developed the base 60 system and advanced geometry recorded in clay with quiet precision. Mesopotamia teaches us that the greatest structures are not always built of stone, but of ideas. The very concepts of the city, the king, the empire, the written contract, the organized school, and the epic hero all echo back to the land between the rivers. The enduring power of this culture lay in its adaptability and its ability to archive its own memory in the enduring yet humble medium of clay. Chapter 6. The Second Cycle. The Iron Grip of Assyria. A second turning point, the peaceful document-driven legacy of Hammurabi and the beautiful restoration of Ur-Nammu have been established. We now move into a second, more forceful turning point in Mesopotamian history, characterized by the rise of the northern power, the Neo-Assyrian Empire c. 911-609 BCE. The Assyrians, originally a minor city-state centered around Ashur on the Tigris, learned the quiet lessons of the early empires better than anyone else. They recognized the deep legacy of centralized writing and the strategic importance of organized labor, but married it to a fierce, organized military structure forged in the harsh, rocky terrain of the north. This period was a transformation because it replaced the localized city-centric model of governance with a centralized imperial apparatus built on total calculated efficiency. The great Assyrian kings, such as Tiglath-Pileser III, were masters of administrative innovation, a skill directly inherited from the early Mesopotamian need for centralized management of the rivers. Tiglath-Pileser III introduced the policy of mass deportation, a severe yet highly effective tool for maintaining order across a vast territory. This was not random cruelty, but a calculated administrative technique. By relocating conquered populations, he broke up local power structures, reduced the threat of rebellion, and most importantly, redistributed skilled labor and cultural knowledge across the empire. The deported peoples, though, suffering great loss, contributed their skills, their craftsmanship, their agricultural techniques, their understanding of irrigation to the Assyrian heartland. This system of control required an unprecedented level of bureaucracy, all managed by the enduring cuneiform script still pressed into clay. The Assyrians built extensive road networks, utilizing their mastery of logistics to move armies and communications swiftly. They mastered the relay system of royal messengers, ensuring that the king's will was known quickly across the vast plains and mountains. Visualize the quiet organization of the Assyrian state, not the chaos of battle, but the silent efficiency of the scribes, recording everything from taxes on dates and grain to the deployment of thousands of troops. The capital city of Nineveh, under later kings like Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal, became the centerpiece of this terrifying yet orderly power. The most enduring quiet legacy of this fierce era was, paradoxically, its commitment to knowledge. King Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria, was a scholar who understood that the true continuity of the empire lay in its history. He ordered the systematic collection and copying of every major piece of literature, astronomy, law, and religious text from the Sumerian and Babylonian traditions. In his library at Nineveh, thousands of clay tablets were stored and cataloged, the first truly comprehensive library in history. This archive preserved Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish, the creation myth, and countless other foundational texts that otherwise would have been lost to the dust of fallen cities. The fierce warriors of the north thus became the gentle, unwitting custodians of the soft, poetic legacy of the south. The Assyrian era was a turbulent yet deeply formative cycle, proving that the Mesopotamian tradition was adaptable, capable of surviving not just the river's chaos, but the iron will of ambitious kings. Chapter 7. Turning Points. The crushing weight of the Assyrian machine and its fall. The power of the Assyrian machine, while built on the enduring foundation of Mesopotamian organization, reached a turning point that was both its zenith and its fatal flaw. The sheer force required to sustain the empire created an unsustainable internal tension. The Assyrian military under kings like Sennacherib, who built the great city of Nineveh, transformed warfare. It was systematic, incorporating diverse corps like chariotry cavalry archers and specialized siege engineers. Their innovations in siege warfare, including the use of battering rams and strategic sapping, meant that no walled city on the plain was truly safe anymore. This systematic quiet efficiency, combined with a calculated use of terror, ensured their dominance over their vast territory. The turning point was so extreme that it inevitably triggered an equally extreme counter-reaction. The massive military and administrative requirements stretched the empire's resources and goodwill to the breaking point. The Assyrians needed constant war to fund their administration, and the deep, enduring resentment of the conquered peoples, especially the Babylonians in the south, grew into a unified hatred. The final dramatic turning point came in the late 7th century BCE. The subject peoples, led by the Medes from the east and the Neo-Babylonians from the south, joined forces in a final, overwhelming assault. This alliance represented the union of the enduring cultural heart of Mesopotamia, Babylon, and the raw, organized power of the mountain tribes, Medes. In a swift, devastating campaign, the mighty capital of Nineveh was besieged and fell in 612 BCE. The destruction was so total and so fierce that the memory of the great city faded almost entirely from historical record for centuries, becoming little more than a whisper of myth and legend, until modern archaeology recovered its silent ruins. The iron grip of the Assyrian machine was broken, proving that even the most meticulously organized empire, built on fear, cannot withstand the collective, organized will of its subjects. The demise of Assyria was the final violent closure of a massive, long-running military administrative experiment in the heart of the ancient world. The Empire of the North had taught the world the power of total war, but its sudden absolute demise taught the world the danger of absolute tyranny. The immediate vacuum left by the collapse of Assyria allowed for a final glorious flourishing of the culture that had been the Assyrians' longest rival and captive, the city of Babylon. Chapter 8. The Second Cycle. The Jeweled Rise of Babylon. The fierce iron grip of Assyria has crumbled, and a quiet, ancient justice prevails. The world is briefly at peace, but the memory of empire has been awakened. This quiet period is marked by the astonishing return of the south, of the rise of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, 626-539 BCE, a final glittering expression of the Sumerian legacy. This was a time of rebuilding and introspection focused on the deep wisdom of the past. The key figure in this restoration is Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar did not rule with the calculated terror of the Assyrians, but with a grandeur focused on the glorification of the ancient city of Babylon. He consciously linked his reign back to the days of Hammurabi and the great kings of Sumer, attempting to embody Mahyat, the cosmic order, through monumental construction and cultural preservation. Imagine the city of Babylon under his rule. It became the largest, most magnificent city the ancient world had ever seen, built entirely of baked brick, a testament to Babylonian engineering that used bitumen asphalt from the region as mortar, making the structures incredibly durable. The city was protected by immense double walls, so thick that chariots could race atop them, a symbol of stability and power. The most famous architectural expression of this era was the Ishtar Gate. This was the 8th gate to the inner city, a massive gleaming structure of lapis lazuli-colored glazed brick, decorated with majestic images of yellow and white animals. Bulls for the god Adad, and dragons for the city god Marduk. It was not a fortification of fear, but a dazzling declaration of cultural and religious supremacy. Nearby rose the towering Etemenenki, the immense ziggurat dedicated to Marduk, the city's patron deity. This structure is often considered the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. Its monumental height and 7 receding layers were a quiet, powerful symbol of the connection between the heavens and the earth, reaching up into the still night air to meet the meticulous observations of the Babylonian astronomers. Nebuchadnezzar is also credited with the construction of the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though their exact location remains elusive, the concept itself speaks to the Babylonian desire to create a paradise on earth, an oasis of greenery and soft water in the arid plain. This required advanced irrigation technology, lifting water high into the terraced gardens, another quiet, enduring legacy of the necessity of mastering the rivers. Culturally, the Neo-Babylonians were the ultimate heirs of Sumer. They revered the ancient texts, expanding their libraries and making immense strides in mathematics and astronomy. They perfected the calculation of planetary movements, predicting eclipses with quiet, astonishing accuracy. This knowledge, recorded on countless clay tablets, was a direct continuation of the first cuneiform signs etched in Uruk centuries before. However, even this magnificent gold-decked empire carried the seed of the turning point within it. Babylon geographically was too open, too desirable, and too reliant on the strength of a single ruler. Following the long reign of Nebuchadnezzar, a succession of weak kings followed, and the empire grew distracted. The final soft turn of the cycle came not through a devastating siege, but through a calculated maneuver by an external force, the Persians. In 539 BCE, under the quiet brilliance of Cyrus the Great, the Persian army entered Babylon almost without a fight. The city, perhaps disillusioned by its current king Nabonidus, was simply incorporated into a new, even larger empire. The fall of Babylon was serene and symbolic. The ancient Mesopotamian political model, the independent city-state dominating the plain, had met its match in a truly multinational, globally conscious empire. Though the Persians respected Babylonian culture, the political sovereignty of the 2 rivers was extinguished forever. The great light of Babylon faded, leaving behind only the dazzling, colorful bricks of the Ishtar Gate and the profound, slow wisdom of its astronomical records, the final shimmering echoes of the land between the rivers. Chapter 9. Legacy. The enduring echoes beyond the rivers. With the serene, almost effortless fall of Babylon to the Persians in 539 BCE, the political sovereignty of the Mesopotamian heartland came to its definitive end. The legacy of this final shimmering empire was not its military strength, but the quiet, deep wisdom it transmitted to the new global powers. The Persians, and later the Greeks under Alexander the Great, did not destroy Babylon. They inherited it. They recognized the immense value of the administrative and intellectual framework the Mesopotamians had spent millennia perfecting. The most enduring element of this final legacy was the transmission of knowledge. The Persian kings, and specifically Alexander, respected the Babylonian astronomers and scribes. The records kept on clay tablets, the meticulous observations of the planets, the detailed mathematics, the ancient epics, were preserved and studied. This knowledge flowed outward, east toward India and west toward the emerging Greek world. Consider the soft, lasting impact on the West, astronomy and time. The Babylonian system of tracking the heavens formed the basis of Greek and Hellenistic astronomy. Their division of the circle into 360 degrees and their base 60 system for time minutes and seconds endure in your daily life. A direct, quiet inheritance from the scribes gazing at the night sky over the Euphrates. The zodiac. The concept of the 12 signs of the zodiac, mapped meticulously across the sky, was formalized by the Babylonians, providing a cosmic framework adopted and expanded by the Greeks. Architecture and form. The Persians adopted the concept of massive imperial capital cities and grand public works from their Mesopotamian predecessors. Even the Greek historians like Herodotus dedicated awe-filled pages to describing the immense walls and ziggurats of Babylon, ensuring their legacy entered the European imagination. The political history of Mesopotamia ended, but its cultural legacy became the river that nourished all subsequent Western civilizations. The great river valleys had done their work. For a final image, imagine the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, now silent and buried, but its knowledge having been copied, translated, and carried away in the gentle flow of intellectual exchange. The clay tablets, once mere receipts and tax records, became the durable vessels that carried the world's first stories, first laws, and first sciences into eternity. The land between the rivers taught humanity how to live together in large, complex societies, how to govern with predictable laws, and how to measure the world around them, quiet lessons that continue to define the structures of our modern existence. We have completed our slow drift back through time, moving from the primordial waters of Chapter 1 to the great cities of Chapter 2, the heroic journeys of Chapter 3, and the immense turning points of empire in Chapters 4 through 8. We observed how the necessity of controlling the unpredictable rivers gave birth to the first cities, the first writing, and the first systematic laws, and how that profound legacy shaped the world. The story of Mesopotamia reminds us that stability is not found in permanence, but in adaptability. The soft clay, though easily broken, was the most enduring medium for memory. The river, though chaotic, was the source of all order. It suggests that the most lasting things are often the simplest tools: the scribe's stylus, the farmer's ditch, the quiet record of the night sky. If this gentle journey brought you ease, feel free to leave a soft like or whisper in the comments about where you'd like to drift next. And now, let the night grow still. Let your breath settle. May sleep come softly and carry you into peaceful rest. Good night.